Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at the 2025 Oscar or 97th Academy Awards, if you want to be formal about it. We'll be having a discussion about who is going to win in 3 of the categories and talk about why we think that's the case. And then we'll cap off our conversation with who we think should have won or should be in the running. With me today is Dara Sanders of the Alexandria Film Festival, and it's going to be a very intense discussion. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know down below in the comments below what your thoughts are. Do you agree with our assessment, or do you think we're just talking bollocks? And as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll dive in. Dara, how are you doing today on this fine Sunday afternoon?
I'm doing great. The weather is warming up a bit. So now when I take my dog out, she's not freaked out about the cold. So I'm kind of liking where the weather is headed. I think it's in the 50s.
Same here.
I was slightly hopeful for another snowstorm, but it's fine. We don't have to have one.
Well, I was going to say the snowstorm here, and I say that in quotes.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I remember looking outside. I remember looking outside on Wednesday, and we got flurries.
Yes.
And this was at like 6:30 in the morning, and then by 8 o'clock I looked and everything was gone. I was like, okay, that's a bit disappointing. But I want to go and dive into our Oscar predictions, because the Oscars are a week away, and at least here on the podcast we've reviewed several of the contenders, the most recent one being Emilia Perez, so go ahead and watch that. But we're looking at 3 categories today, and the reason why is because these particular categories, I think, elicit the most discussions, and plus it kind of suits the way that we approach filmmaking. We're not going to really look at the technical aspects like editing, cinematography, or costume or anything like that, because it's a little bit out of our scope. But we are going to be looking at Best Picture, Best Actor/Actress, and Best Writing. So let's go ahead and start off, Dara, with Best Actor/Actress, because we're looking at the list right now, and at least for Best Actor, I know who I think is going to clinch the award on Sunday. But why don't you go ahead and take us into your predictions for the Best Actor/Actress category?
So I personally think Adrien Brody is going to win. I think that whenever you do an epic, a 3-hour film,
it's an epic, yeah.
It's an epic, right? So like whenever you do an epic and you have like this major screen time and it's like a sweeping film, like films like that typically are going to get, especially if they're pretty good, Oscar consideration. And therefore, you know, as long as the performances are great, you're going to get that nomination. And I think when we look at, you know, these nominations, and we've discussed it, there aren't a lot of strong films. And so I see this Oscars, the theme I'm thinking of in this Oscars is more of a sweep in terms of like, you know, writing, Best Picture, Actor. Like I could see one film getting a lot of Oscar wins. And I think this year it's probably The Brutalist.
Yeah, and the Brutalist is a historical, or I should say, period piece, because it's set in the aftermath of World War II, where we've got a Hungarian Jew, you know, basically doing a homecoming. And I gotta say, like, I think that seems to be Adrien Brody's forte, is doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, no, totally. And like, you know, and I would also say, like, he's not someone that acts a ton, right? I think he's very selective, and I could be wrong, just based on the roles I see him in. It really appears that he carefully selects the films that he will take on. He doesn't take on like probably everything that comes to him.
Well, I was going to say, did you ever see a little movie called The Predator?
Well, okay, sorry. Yeah, okay, that's fair. That is fair, because that was like, interesting choice.
That was a bit of a head scratcher, but
that was a very interesting choice. Yeah, that's fair.
But it also came at a time where I think he really wanted to show off his range as an actor, and I think in this particular case it kind of fell short, because he started off in a position where he's on the moon, which is a game reserved for predators, and then halfway through the film we see Lawrence Fishburne, and then that kind of at that point it just becomes a focus on Lawrence Fishburne, really. Right. But in terms of The Brutalist, what was it about Adrien Brody's performance in particular that you thought I think he's a shoe, and I think he's gonna walk away with that award on Sunday.
So I haven't seen all of the Brew List. So let me just say that.
That makes two of us.
Yeah. So like I think that's kind of the issue with a movie kind of that long. That I think that's kind of gonna happen. But I think I'm looking at him in comparison to the other nominees, right? So when I look at the nominees, I think about Sebastian Stan. Really not a lot of press for this film. The Apprentice, and his performance was good, but The Apprentice really didn't get the coverage. No money spent on a marketing campaign. Like I've almost forgotten about it.
Well, keep in mind at that time too, there was a little thing called the 2024 general election.
I understand.
So.
No, I totally understand, but I do think that his performance wasn't. I haven't heard it be celebrated except right when the film first was released. Then it was kind of no longer a talking point, right? Like you don't see continuous articles about this film as a whole, because I think the film as a whole, which has to me two great performances, didn't move people for whatever reason. Like you said, it's the 24 election. I think it's Trump fatigue. You know, there could be a lot of different reasons, but Sebastian Stan is a serious dark horse, and I just don't see him winning. I look at Ralph Fiennes' Conclave, and though he held the movie together, you know, this wasn't like one of his stronger performances. It was a very quiet performance.
Right.
He was good, but didn't separate himself, I thought. Coleman Domingo, not a lot of press or coverage about his performance. Timothy Chalamet is a little bit different because everyone loves Bob Dylan. He's doing the singing. You're taking on like this role of this icon. But that performance as well, still a little mixed reviews. And it seems like the only consensus has been Adrian Brody. That's why I end up with him.
Right.
And he has the Oscar pedigree, of course. This is his wheelhouse. Like films like this. This is his wheelhouse, I feel like. So even without seeing all of the Brew List, I feel confident that, you know, if it's not him, gosh, like it's in terms of who could get it, I guess they could give it to Ralph Fiennes if this is like a conclave sweep situation, but I'm still leaning towards Adrian Brody.
Well, another thing too is the fact that to your point, Adrian Brody, is in his element in this movie, but at the same time, I mean, you also want to keep in mind that the overall selection, and I think you alluded to this earlier, it's pretty. They could have done better. They could have expanded it a little bit more,
Yeah.
and that leads me to wonder what exactly is the criteria, if anything, because you run a film festival, so and we've had discussions in the past about how you go about selecting what movies you're gonna put in the slots whenever you run the festival. So
Right.
I'm wondering, like, what kind of criteria are they looking for? Are they just looking for name recognition? Because we do have some pretty established actors, and then we do have the Wonder Kid, i.e. Timothy Chalamet. But even then, with these actors, you kind of wonder, like how daring can they be? Now, I will say this: I think if they had included Ralph Fiennes' movie The Return, I think it would be a little bit more interesting, because he's more known for playing, to your point, subdued characters, right? Whether it's him playing Voldemort or Hades or whoever, it's very dignified, right? Whereas in The Return, he's more it's more of him kind of having to, like, strap on his boots and kind of get his hands dirty.
Right. And what we know about the Oscars, right? Like, just in general, there are always at least one surprise. however that happens, it just generally always happens that there's like a surprise. I'm trying to think if it wasn't last year. I remember the year that I think about a lot is Glenn Close in The Wife and Olivia Colman in The Favorite. And because I had seen both films, loved them both, loved both performances, but I so wanted Glenn Close to win an Oscar. And she had won the Golden Globe, and it was really, really tight, of course. And even Olivia Colman was shocked um, when she won. And so, like, but I feel like there's always kind of one surprise. Like, if it's screenplay, best supporting actor or actress, like, there's always kind of a surprise. And as you mentioned, we were going to do this. One of the things I thought of is, if there's a surprise, which category would it be? And I have completely eliminated Best Actor as a surprise category.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of all of the categories, I think Best Actor is pretty conservative. I would even go so far as to say, like, Best Design is pretty conservative too, because you know, when you watch these movies, you kind of get the feel, in the back of your neck, and yeah, I could sort of see that happening, because because obviously it takes a lot more work to kind of for a team to put together this realization of what a director is looking for. Like, for example, like Gladiator 2, when you're trying to recreate ancient Rome, or with Wicked, or I should say Wicked Part 1, where you're trying to recreate the Land of Oz, right? I think Best Actress is going to be more of a wild card.
I agree.
And then I was gonna say, in terms of best writing, best story, I think that's also conservative, because I think with them, you kind of know they're usually going to lean into something that's going to be a bit more either familiar or innovative.
Innovative is, to me, what it should be, like, with writing anyway. But.
And I think that's the issue with with the Academy Awards over the past few years, where it's kind of like they've gotten lazy. I don't know if you've gotten that sense, but I kind of feel like they've decided to play it safe rather than try to, like, think outside of the box, so to speak.
Well, like, this is the thing, though. Like, I remember when I think about Oscar films from, let's say, 20 years ago, right? Like, the films, the caliber, right? The caliber of films that were generally nominated, and the performances. These were so indie films that no one generally had watched. These were not the box office films, right? Rarely was a box office, a successful film included in Oscar consideration. It happened every now and then. And I feel like the Oscars felt like they were, still prominent, of course. You're an Oscar winner, it's a big deal. But at the same time, there was like this idea that we need to connect more, and we're not reaching other audiences. They got concerned about their ratings, right? And I found that kind of interesting. And I think, to me, what happened with the pandemic and movies in general, right? There was like this slow attempt to catch up to, like, movies that, we'll do streaming. There's so many factors now that has limited the quality of film. Because having let's say an Oscar, let's say you have Morgan Freeman, Oscar winner, right? Or, whatever in your film, that does not mean it's going to get a studio, a formal release. It could end up straight to video, straight to streaming. Or they have films that Netflix releases or Prime releases. Like, there's so many, factors here, like Amelia Perez. Like, there's so many factors here. And I don't know that has affected the quality as much, or it's affected the creatives in taking risks. Like, I don't know where it comes from.
Are you saying this on? Are you saying it's on the part of, like, the big studio films or the streaming?
Right. I feel like the big studio films, they don't take the chances they used to. Therefore, right. I think the creatives don't take the chances because they can't afford to. Right. So you have this film. What are you going to do about it? Who's going to see it?
Right.
What do you do? Like, so, yeah. And so I don't know where we go from here on that, because I will say, like, who won Best Picture last year? Can Can you remember off the top of your head? I'm trying to remember.
I'm looking it up right now. Let me see
Okay,
here.
I'm just trying to think about the last best picture that I was like, whoa, yes.
Well, to your point, another thing that I find a bit frustrating is the fact that a lot of these movies, they're kind of subpar in terms of quality.
Yes.
I mean, I can remember a time where where you had these different nominees, and they were kind of neck and neck, and it was like, to use a football analogy, like they were only like a field goal away from winning the game.
Mhm.
So I feel like here it's kind of like there's going to be a huge margin between these, between whoever wins, because it's just one of those movies where you just think, okay, I guess it doesn't suck as much, so we'll go with
Right,
that.
and that's where we are, right? That's now we're like, the standard has been now lowered, right? Like, and you're now looking at best picture and you're saying, okay, who really separated themselves? Well, I kind of like this about this movie, I like this about that movie, but nothing is like the runaway, right? I think people overall, like, I actually had my parents both watch Conclave, they both really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Of all the films that I think about, that's the one that appears to appeal to most, not everybody,
Right.
but most people.
Right. It's kind of like the social. It's kind. If you think about it, it's kind of like the social media approach, where if it has the most likes or the most followers, that's going to win, as opposed to before, where it's like, if it's a movie that challenges the way that we look at films or the way that we understand it, then obviously, then obviously it's going to win. By the way, the winner of last year's was Oppenheimer by Christopher
Right.
Nolan.
Yeah. And I really, I gotta just mention this because it's something that also bothers me, because I've been catching up on Oscar films, and it's so funny how you could, kind of knock out, oh, this movie is only an hour 40 minutes. Like Anora is 2 hours and 20 minutes. Substance is 2 hours and 20 minutes. The Brutalist is what? 3 hours and 30 minutes? I mean, come on. I'm sure Conclave is over 2 hours. What are you doing to people?
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder just how much story do you need to tell, because I'll say this, what I appreciate about Anora is it kind of like gets into the plot. It doesn't kind of give us the intro or anything like that. Conclave, it felt a little bit like like a bottle episode. It was like a costume drama. It was like everything is kind of dragged out. They want you to feel the tension, and it's like after a while it's like, yeah, we get it, like a lot of these Cardinals don't like each other. Like, can we just move on from here? But I mean, I was gonna say, if y'all want to see our full discussion of Conclave, check out that review. It's out now. So you're saying Adrian Brody's gonna walk away?
I'm saying Adrian Brody, and I'm willing to, if there was, and I'm sure there's some betting platform where you can. I think he would be at minus. Like, I don't know, because I haven't checked, but I assume he would be at minus on the odds.
But I mean, think about it. I mean, if you look at the contenders in that category, I mean, these are well-known and established actors.
They are.
I mean, so I would say out of all the categories, I think this one is going to be pretty close, between some of them. Now you've mentioned him already, but I am going to say Ralph Fiennes from Conclave, and the reason why I say that is because he brings such and obviously, he's an English actor, so they always bring the sort of like dignitas to the role. But I just find the way that he carries himself, as as the leader of the Conclave, so brilliant. I will also add to the fact that he's portraying a cardinal who is very much torn between what his personal beliefs are and trying to look out for the best for not only the rest of the Cardinals, but for the Catholic Church.
Right.
I think is phenomenal. It's such a wonderful performance, because I feel like with Adrian Brody's performances, I feel like at times they could sort of be in your face. Sometimes he can be a bit too over. I feel like with I feel like with Ralph Fiennes, he makes you feel for him, like the I mean just the way that he performs and the way he
That's
looks, the
fair.
way he
I
carries
think that's
himself.
fair. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's fair. Like, and and sometimes it's interesting you say that, because sometimes when you have roles like this, you can at times overlook that the power that they have on the screen, because it's so effortless, right? And I
right.
think maybe I mistakenly saw it as more effortless, so it was just like, well, he's just acting, that's what he
Well,
does, which I think is a mistake sometimes.
well, I wouldn't say it's well. Yeah, I would say it's effortless, but it comes from having done the craft for so long. Like
Sure.
it's not like muscle memory. It's like after you do it for a while, like you just instinctively know that this is how you need to perform.
Right,
It
right.
it kind of reminds me of the the way that shit, what's his name? He played Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars. I'm still gonna kick myself for not knowing this. But hold on, this is gonna bother me. But while I talk, but while I Alec Guinness, that's who it is.
Okay.
The way that Ralph Fiennes carries himself in that role is very similar to the way that Alec Guinness carries himself when he plays his characters. Now I'm not entirely sure if Ralph Fiennes kind of like tapped into Alec Guinness's performance, when he did Conclave or any other role, but I feel like there's a lot of similarity between those two because they do carry themselves in such a way that you believe them in that role. Like
True.
you can
Yes.
you can
And
see
that's
them in that.
important too, right? And that's important too. But we also have somebody like Ray Fiennes has such a large body of work. We can say,
That's
wow,
true.
but then he was a serial killer in Red Dragon. He was insane, right? Like that was a crazy role for him, right? So we know what his range is, right? Like he's done a lot, right? Like we can really, and so it is a lot like comparing Glenn Close's role versus Olivia Colman in The Favorite, right? Glenn Close's performance was not in any way loud or in your face. That was her
Right.
husband, right? Like, and she completely was in the background, like as she had been for years. And so, but when we
But she disappears into these roles too. That's another thing.
but when we think of Glenn Close, we're introduced to her in Fatal Attraction, where she's insane. So
Yeah.
so you see this range she has, and she can really play up this belligerent woman. So I'm just saying, as an example.
Right, but don't forget. I mean, to your point, a lot of these actors, we've seen the range of their character acting. I think Glenn Close. I think her best role was in Albert Nobbs, where she played this
The
the transvestite, and then we see Ralph Fiennes, to your point, where in Red Dragon, where he's insane, but then he can also play, a villain, in a famous franchise like Harry Potter, but then come back and play a very self-effacing cardinal in Conclave.
But let's just also say because a lot of people wonder in that role if he was also plotting on the side. So there's also that suggestion, which is character, which adds a little bit of color to his character as well.
Right, because he is very sympathetic
on the bus, right?
Right, because he is very sympathetic to a certain faction,
right.
During the conclave. Yeah, exactly. But what I really applaud him for is the fact that even though we know where his sympathies lies, we also applaud for the fact that he has to remain objective, as much as he wants to kind of like put his hat in the ring, so to speak. He also understands this is something that is far above myself or any one of us, really.
Right.
Because we serve an ideal, really.
Yeah, and also like if the movie, everything has to work in a movie like that to me. So like, his role and performance works well because it's a well done film also, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Right. So that kind of helps as well. And also, as I talk to people that have seen this movie, this movie kind of forces you to a point to get invested in certain people to win, right? Like certain people right? And so like the backstabbing and all this stuff, you're just like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? You know, and you kind of get invested like in the film.
Well, also to keep in mind, because it's very much it's very much like a bottle episode. It's confined to one place, so we're not distracted with, like say instance with Honora, where like with Honora, we're taking to all different.
Oh my
I guess we're taking to all 5 boroughs of New York for whatever reason. Whereas here, it's like confined to one space, so it becomes a character-driven drama, which I really, really appreciate. I will also, I'll even go so far as to say, you know, the whole purpose of making a movie and for an actor to take on this character is for the audience to believe this is who they are.
Right.
And I feel,
yeah.
Yeah, and as much as I like Adrian Brody, you know, as an actor, at the same time, it's like it's like I wouldn't say he's someone who kind of, you know, does well in certain genres. And that's not to say like he can't, you know, he doesn't have range or he's not willing to try different movies, because he has done different roles in different movies at times, like the Predator, like I guess Predator or Predators, for instance, where you know, where it really didn't suit him, but at the same time you can sort of appreciate why he did it.
Yeah, but like, okay, so like I was first introduced to Adrian Brody in the movie, a very, very indie film. I think it was called The Restaurant. And well, it was a bunch of people working in a restaurant. Of course, they had other goals. They wanted to be actors, all that stuff. Yeah. That's when I first discovered him. Oh God, I think it's called The Restaurant. Jesse L. Martin was in it. There were a lot of different people in it. But it's years, because it's so random, because Lauryn Hill is in it. Let me see. I'm gonna tell you this movie. But I'm just, it's funny because I'm just, you know, okay, so I know he was in he's done some of Wes Anderson's films.
Yeah, I usually associate him with Wes Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
He also did I remember, I mean, he also did The Pianist also, which was another great film too. But I feel like I feel like with an actor like Adrian Brody, like if you put him in the right movie that plays to his strengths, like you'll get gold, right?
Yeah, it was called Restaurant.
Right. Whereas with Ralph Fiennes, like whatever movie you put him in, he'll find a way to make it work. And that's why I feels the difference between the two.
Fair.
I mean, Timothy Chalamet, I don't want to say too much because he's a young actor, but I will say that I do find that he kind of works better in more action-driven films, because I did watch The King recently, which is like a retelling of Henry V by Shakespeare. I thought he did a decent job in that, and then I saw Dune parts 1 and 2. I felt like that kind of worked for him. I feel like when he does someone like Bob Dylan, I feel like he can do it, but you know, it kind of feels like it's a bit more of a struggle on this part. But again, you know, I don't want to sound too unfair, because he hasn't had the established body of work like the other two.
And I think it's brave to take on a role like this. Like you take on a role like this, criticism is going to come, no matter how good you were. Honestly, like, you know, some people, you know, are going to criticize some part of the performance, especially if they think that, oh, well, Bob Dylan wouldn't do his hand like that, or whatever it is, because you're actually playing someone, actually a living person, but a historical person.
Yeah,
and
no,
that
pop
makes
icon,
it more difficult. Yeah.
We'll also keep in mind too. I mean, because Martin Scorsese, I think he made 3 documentaries about Bob Dylan now. One of the documentaries I watched not too long ago was Rolling Thunder, which was about a concert he did back in the 70s. And then I think like 20 years ago, 20 years ago, he did another documentary called No Direction Home. So we get a very good intimate look at how Bob Dylan performs and who he is as a person, or as so there's a lot of a lot of ways to reference Bob Dylan, as opposed to, if you're doing something like Nina Simone, who who hasn't had as much exposure, you kind of take more, I guess, more creative liberties, because because there isn't as much of a reference point as, say, Bob Dylan, who has been performing for 50 something years and has had plenty of movies made about him in the
And
process.
also, and it's important to note, like, there's like this belief that if it's somebody that has had a very long career, started early on, you kind of want to do just one portion of their lives, kind of, if you're going to do a movie, because it's really hard to kind of Wikipedia through, kind of like they did to me with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Or what they did in Napoleon too, because I think where Napoleon fell flat was they tried to capture the whole aspect of his life.
That's not, you shouldn't do, to me, you shouldn't do that. So
it's too much.
It's too much, and especially for certain people, it's too much. And I think with Nina Simone, I think they did the right thing by focusing on a certain part of her life. But Nina Simone is not well known enough to do that. And so, like, I don't know, like, and she's had an interesting life, which is unfortunate. And, she had mental health issues, but, like, I don't know why they chose to do it this way. Like, it's really unfortunate, because I do think with some people, when you do a biography, I think you can't just run through their life.
Right.
It's Wikipedian their life. It's so unfair to do that, because now you have to, they didn't cover this. Oh, well, what about that part? I remember this.
But that's my thing. My thing is that if you're going to do something like that, to your point, they need to focus on a specific point in their life that is significant. And I would even go so far as to say, don't try to capture every aspect of their life. That's the reason why documentaries exist. Let the documentaries do the heavy lifting, and then you can just take a portion of it and kind of do whatever you want.
Because when you think about it, Bob Dylan, just focusing on the 60s, right?
Or the early 60s, to be more specific.
Yeah, I mean, right. So just focusing on that, you got a lot of material. You got a lot of material. Like, let's be honest here, right? So yeah, it's really unfortunate when that happens. And so I really applaud when creatives say, okay, we're going to do this person, but we're going to focus only on this. Like if they did a movie leading up to John Lennon's assassination or something like that. Like, what was his life like at the time? Do like a brief overview, like, whatever, Beatles, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But something like that, like, and I feel like everybody hasn't gotten the memo, because look, Bohemian Rhapsody was extremely successful. I mean, it did win Best Picture, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, which is insane. That's insane.
But that's more of an exception, not the rule, when you look at it.
Well, Green Book. Okay, great. Did Green Book deserve Best Picture?
Yeah, I mean, but to bring it back to Ralph Fiennes, I mean, I think the way that he performs in that movie, you can believe, that he really is, a cardinal in the Catholic Church, and he brings this dignity to it that you really feel like I trust this guy, like as much as you. As much as you feel like he may have his own prejudices or his own beliefs.
Oh, totally.
Like you can buy into that. So I do want staying in performance. I want to move on to best actress. So who do you have on the books for clinching the award?
So, like, this is a fascinating category. As I told you, I've seen most of the performances here, and obviously we have to, off the top, say that Carla Sofia Gascon is not going to win, right? Like, we know that. We can kind of take her out.
Yeah, it's because of the tweets, right?
About the tweets, and also, they basically said we're not going to market her. I think they're going to focus on Zoe Saldana, if at all. Everyone else on the film has alienated her, so she's completely out. But I think that, and I have not seen I'm Still Here, so that's a tough one for me, and I'm sure she was great. But I do think Demi's performance was a revelation. I don't want to say I didn't know she had it in her. I feel like that's unfortunate because like people felt like that when Charlize Theron did the monster film, right? Eileen Wuornos. People were because she had not done anything like that up to that point.
But it was such a brilliant performance. Like,
yeah, but I don't want to say that Demi's been around a long time, but you know, and it's not just her, it's the writing, it's the film. But what a fascinating film. Like just engrossing, kind of icky, especially like, you know, when she first the substance part kind of happens. But I was kind of starting out just like, okay, what are we doing here? What's going on here? And yeah, I just thought, and you know, to be honest, because she shares so much of herself physically in the film, that gets points to Oscar voters. It's like she bears her whole soul, right? And you do feel her situation, and I do think that's partly the acting and the writing, but you do feel her, I guess, like, and that has to be a credit to her in the performance in the role.
But it's also relevant to where she is in her life as well.
But that's what makes it fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it fascinating to me that, you know, this movie role comes along and it's like, my God, you're perfect for this. You're perfect, and it's like, you know, and I don't know. You know, I'm trying to think who else might work for this film, but I think great casting. But as of right now, I would be shocked if she didn't win. And I hate to say shocked. That's a little strong.
Yeah.
But
that's fair.
She's gonna win.
Well, I was gonna say because the performance is kind of similar to what she underwent when she did G.I. Jane. Remember?
Oh God, I love that movie, and that's not even my type of movie.
I mean, tell me you didn't feel the same raw energy that she put in the performance that she did in G.I. Jane. Like, it's kind of So I was watching this documentary about Glenn Gould. He was a famous Canadian pianist in the late 20th century, and he was famous for his innovative piano playing. And in the 50s, he did a very unique take on the Goldberg variations, right? So when people heard the Goldberg variations, they were like, "This is new. We've never seen this interpretation before." And he was like in his like early 20s at that time. You flash forward to I think 1980 or 81, where he does it again. People were initially surprised and they thought, "Why is he doing the Goldberg variations? The first time he did it was amazing." But when you listen to the 1980s performance of that piece, it's a lot more subdued because and a lot of musicologists and critics have said this is a man who's basically lived a life and he's reinterpreting, you know, the same piece that he did, you know, 30 years ago, but basically doing it in a way that speaks more to, you know, what he's been through and where his mind is at that point in his life. And you could sort of see the same thing in The Substance, where Demi Moore, you know, she put herself out there, you know, in G.I. Jane. Yeah, but the way that she performs but the way she does her performance in The Substance, it's very similar to what she does in G.I. Jane. But you know, but just like Glenn Gould, she's lived a life. She's gone through her ups and downs. So the performance, so what you get with the raw energy of a 20-something-year-old in G.I. Jane, you can sort of see it reinterpreted in The Substance, but it's far more relevant because it's relevant to who she is as a person, having gone through a divorce, having been in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons, and having had to endure so many things. You can feel for her.
Yeah, but I would also say, and I'll say two things. It's interesting that example you just showed because a lot of people say the same thing about Billie Holiday. You can listen to early Billie Holiday stuff before her voice starts cracking, right, over prolonged drug use. Yeah. And a lot of people feel like a lot of her early, because she did a lot of standard songs, right? Like her early work is, you know, non-controversial. She's just singing. There's nothing with heft to it. But in her later life, when her voice starts to crack, and you feel what people say, the real jazz heads, so to speak, is you can feel you can hear the pain in her voice, and that to them is the best Billie Holiday because of the emotion. And I think
that's the real Billie Holiday.
Yeah, so that's the thing with jazz heads when it comes to later Billie Holiday, they think that's the best one, even though sometimes you hear it and you're just like, she sounds kind of off. You know, like you might think that, but it's to them, it's like you're not appreciating that emotion and pain in her voice, and that's what they respond to. And I think that in the substance, what I find interesting is Margaret Qualley's performance. I don't know, is that how you pronounce her last name? Qualley?
Yeah, it's Andy McDowell's daughter.
Yeah, I know it's her daughter, but the contrast, right? When she first looks in the mirror, she says, "Look at me, I am," you know, and it's played up.
It's Demi Moore circa 1988.
Yeah, and it's so played up, the contrast with the two. The younger one is reinvigorated, and Demi is like, my life is over, and no, and I can't. And she calls the guy that she sees, and you know that like contrast with the two of them, I thought was fascinating to watch, because I thought that really boosted to me her performance. To see
yeah, and I was gonna say, and I think Margaret Qualley does a phenomenal job because she really does capture, and I would even go so far as to say I think she probably watched a lot of Demi's early films to kind of get the feel for who she was as a person. I think that's how she kind of I mean, tell me you don't tell me she didn't do that, because the way that she carries herself, it's like, okay, I can sort of see this as a young Demi Moore, you know, coming onto the Hollywood scene before she met Bruce Willis and everything.
I mean, to me, it's so interesting you say that, because it's a female director, but you know, there are these gratuitous shots of her butt, right? The butt of a 25-year-old woman, right? Like everything's in place and they're continuous, right? These shots of her as she's doing the fitness, right? Which is really a perfect vehicle to do it that way, as she's like dancing and she still has it. And of course they show Demi's bare butt, which has completely dropped, right? Like, so it's all these contrasts. And I feel like both women, and I don't think she's nominated, right? Or am I wrong? Is Margaret nominated?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so, because I looked under supporting.
I find that interesting, but the contrast is really what worked for me in the film.
I think it's a shame that Margaret Qualley wasn't nominated, at least for Best Supporting Actress, because to your point, I think she's a perfect foil. I think if they did something like, kind of like what they did in The Nutty Professor, where where you had Demi Moore play two versions of herself, and they'd like digitally de-aged her, I think that would have been a cheap move. But to have someone like Margaret Qualley kind of capture the spirit of who she was, in her younger days, I think that was genius. Like,
I really thought so, because let's be honest, like you have all these movies, you're like, okay, I'm gonna watch all the Oscar films. You hear a little bit about some kind of black market drug. I had no idea how this film was going to, I knew the synopsis, but not enough about it. So to actually see what it was and it play out was like, okay, this is, like I told you, this is sci-fi. Like I don't know how else, I'd heard horror. I heard all these different.
Yeah, I heard it described as a horror film, and it kind of, and the visual aspect of it, it kind of reminded me of the European horror films that you used to see from the 70s and 80s, kind of like Dario Argento kind of thing,
Yeah. It was it's very squishy, squeamy kind of, I don't know how else to describe it, but a lot of the it was like I don't want to say the ugliness. I can't think of how I want to articulate it, but it was like the meat and bones of stuff. Like it was just like, we're going to bear everything. Like, and that you could see from like the beginning as Dennis Quaid is like eating that shrimp, right? And they're all in his mouth.
It's very visceral.
And he's chewing and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh boy, we're gonna get squishy here. So
yeah. Now, leading actress for me is always a bit difficult.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Zoe Saldana on this one, just because
He's not nominated unless we're doing supporting. Are we doing supporting?
Yeah, I'm going to include supporting on this one because honestly,
Okay.
I can't really think of any because Mikey Madison, I feel she's a complete unknown. So I'm not. I
know. What is she doing?
Well, my thing is like, where did she come from? Because it's
I have no idea. I really don't. I hate to say, is she related to somebody? That's a horrible thing to say.
Yeah, nepotism. Yeah, I know what you mean. But at the same time, it's like you kind of have to wonder like, where do some of these actors and actresses come from? And that's not a knock on her. I thought she did an okay job in Honora, but I feel like with Zoe Saldana, like as much as I disliked Amelia Perez, I felt like she was like the one bright spot in that movie.
She was.
And she took it seriously too, because as I mentioned in the review that we did last week, I mean, this is a movie that doesn't take itself seriously because it's just trying to do too much in too many places. And I think you mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it earlier, for a movie that's trying to focus on a serious subject matter, when you throw in the musical element, that kind of takes you out of the whole thing right then and there.
Right? The disappearances. Like, this is kind of serious, and I'm trying really hard to kind of focus on kind of the storyline, because the guy, that wanted to, I mean, he was like a bad guy, right? Like, and for some reason, I think the musical aspect makes you forget that. It kind of makes it lighter, like instantly lighter.
It takes you out of the movie because then you're like, well, am I supposed to take it seriously or not? So
right, exactly. And there's serious subject matter. That's why it's weird.
And my thing is that my thing is that with Zoe Saldana having to put up with what she's had to put up with, I will go so far as to say, I don't think Zoe Saldana is meant to do musicals, personally speaking, but given what she's had to put up with, I feel like she's a champ for pulling through. Yeah. I mean, when you look at that category, because obviously you want to say, Carla Sofia Gascon, I think she did an okay job, but all the shenanigans that have been going on off screen with the tweets and everything, I feel like that's enough to kind of take her out of contention. But also the fact that she, the performance that she goes through, I felt like it was kind of awkward, right? And then Cynthia Erivo as Falba, I feel like, obviously she fits the role because she's well known as a singer. So I feel like if anything, I think at least Zoe Saldana, if she doesn't clinch it, I think she should at least, deserves to win it because she just does a great job at it.
And she's the only bright spot in the film, which I think is kind of important.
Right.
Too, right. Like, so like the film,
you would go, you could go so far as to say she kind of carries the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think if you're an actress in a supporting role, it's you steal the show. So I think that's apt. Right? You steal the show essentially. Like your performance, while not completely actor screen time, lead actor screen time, every time you are on the screen, it's relevant or monumental or whatever in the film.
Like, yeah, exactly.
So, or the only interesting thing is how I would actually look at it. Because I didn't find the lead actor's character interesting. I didn't find the wife interesting. So I feel like the film
can I just say, like, I just find it so hard to believe that Selena Gomez could play a mom. Like, I'm so used to her. I'm so used to her playing like these young characters, like from Wizards of Waverly Place or Only Murders in the Building. Like when you see her as a playing a maternal role, it's like like, okay, that's a very interesting choice, but you could have picked someone better. And I felt there's too much of an age mismatch too, because you feel like with Menendez's character, he's kind of an older guy anyway, and then you have this younger person.
Definitely.
And it's like,
oh, definitely.
It's like, okay, like try. I'm happy to see try to sell this to me, but I'm not gonna. There's no guarantee I'm gonna buy it, but go for it. So I want to move on to the bigger category here is who is going to win Best Picture. And we've got a very interesting plate here. So I'm on the website right now for the 97th Academy Awards.
I'm looking.
So we've got a decent serving here. So a few of these movies do look familiar. We've got we've got Dune Part 2, obviously, a very dramatic movie. Amelia Perez. Amelia Perez is one of those movies where I kind of sit and scratch my head and wonder,
how did that happen?
Yeah, like how did that happen? And the term Oscar bait gets thrown around a lot, and I think it's justified in this case because I'm wondering, like, what exactly are they doing to like make sure they get in? Because because had they made the character like someone else, like a non-trans character, would it even be in contention?
Sorry, let me just do a detour because this always upsets me and I have to mention it because Crash is interesting Best Picture winner to me, because what you can say right now, like, and I don't want to be dismissive, but the transgender people in America have been attacked definitely by the president, right? And so like that is a storyline and a relevant storyline right now. Crash to me, and that's 2005, won Best Picture, I think, because it didn't succeed, but tried to tackle race relations, right? So like, and Oprah gave it a shout out, and they had a crazy marketing campaign. And I do now believe since that movie won, because Brokeback Mountain by far should have won. I mean, there's no way the fact that it didn't win is insane to me. But Crash winning kind of, made me really disillusioned about how these nominees and winners end up. And I do think it's money, to your point. I guess is what I'm saying, to your point. And that's when I kind of realized it when Crash won, because I'm like, they must have spent money and wooed some people. Like, and that must happen in the Oscar. It must.
They were very aggressive.
Right?
But I mean, another thing too is the fact that you got to take into account, what the mood, what the mood of the country is, and I guess what they're trying to do is they're trying to tap into, what's the hottest cause that you can partake in at the moment, and it looks like, the trans cause still seems to have a lot of steam, so they're gonna go with that, which is fine. But I feel like if you're going to tell a story about a trans person, maybe do it in a more, in a less disingenuous way.
It's an interesting choice, right? Because the whole thing is like a threat, right? The proposal, right? I want to do this and I'm threatening you. I have the money. I'm a criminal, and all this stuff is it's weird. I don't know what else. It's weird.
Well, not even that. And I mentioned it in the review. I mean, to have, a drug cartel leader say, I'm going to transition, I feel is a bit, it's a bit forced. And I would go so far as to say, most trans people aren't going to be in a position where they're sitting on piles and piles of cash, because I mean, if you listen to their stories, a lot of them have to struggle and try to figure out how they're going to, get their next, shot of estrogen or testosterone or whatever in order to carry on with the process of transitioning.
Right.
So to be in a position where you have all these piles of cash, I think it's kind of like when Caitlyn Jenner came out and everyone's like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, because she really doesn't speak to the overall trans experience.
And she wouldn't, right? Like, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we actually screened a film at our festival some years ago. It was called Pearl of Africa, and it was about, at the time Uganda had passed this really extreme anti-gay bill, and I think they were criminalizing homosexuality or gay people, trans people, like the whole thing. But I remember that she was able to go to Kenya, I think, to finish her operation. But what's fascinating to me, as you see people being beaten in the streets in Uganda, you do a documentary on someone like that, you're talking about somebody who has the means to just up and go to Kenya, finish the surgery, which is a lot of money, or go to, no, the surgery was in Southeast Asia, but you can recover in Kenya. Yeah. And you're getting your hair done at this random place. And I'm thinking to myself, you have money. You're not comparable to the people that are struggling and actually probably going to be harmed by this bill in Uganda. So I found that an interesting subject for a documentary about that bill. And I felt like, and I guess maybe you know, she was a safer pick because you could film her this way, that way. But I thought that was disingenuous because you are talking about somebody with money, and you can't sometimes hold certain people up like Caitlyn Jenner and say, oh, but look at her. I like her and I like this and this. She's totally like completely kind of not alienated, but really separated and not representative of that experience. So it's not really fair. And she's also not going to talk about her experience. Right? She's a Republican. Right. She's just going along to get along. She's not going to talk about what, like, that would be suicide, career suicide for her. Like
right. Yeah. I mean, and I mentioned this too, the fact that, you know, the fact that they made a movie that was just so ridiculous and so campy, but they were trying to be serious about it. Was a bit of an odd move, because if you look at a movie like American Fiction, they took the stereotypes of African Americans and they took the piss out of it. And I was like, you know what? That's what they should have done. They should have taken a story like, yeah, they should have taken the piss out of it. But no, they played it straight, and I think that's what made it such an atrocious film.
And it's again, and we can talk towards the end about this as we wrap up, but I mean, we're talking again about a Hollywood that is really missing out on creativity. Here's an original story, Luca, that they just missed, right? This is an original story. But
I think it's an adaptation though of like a musical.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not Okay, my bad. But I'm just saying, I guess my point is, like, if you have original stories that end up like this is a problem in Hollywood, because this got greenlit with a Netflix release.
Well, don't forget too, like it was also met with controversy from both the members of the LGBTQ community and, you know, the Mexican community, because not only did it put, you know, trans people in a bad light, but it also kind of carried on with the stereotypes of Mexico, really.
Yeah, this is interesting. Like, the IMDb now has it at a 5.5, but anybody can do this. And I wonder if it was like ever around 7, because that's low, obviously, for a Best Picture nominee. But this could have happened after those tweets were released, so it's hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So who do you have for winning Best Picture this year?
So Best Picture, I have Conclave. My dark horse is Brutalist. But Conclave is a very, very safe pick. And I think they're going to go safe this year.
Yeah. You stole my pick, but I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. Conclave, I mean, because, well, here's my thing. I think it's because of the fact that, yes, it's a safe pick, but at the same time, I think it does a phenomenal job in taking a concept like, the election of a new pope and kind of putting all these individuals in one place and just seeing what plays out. It's almost, if you think about it, it's almost like an experiment, really, just to see how people will interact with one another. And it doesn't fail to disappoint, because you just see a lot of, the political maneuvering going around between different factions.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because the thing that's interesting about it in terms of, like, let's say budget, right? We're not talking a big budget film here, very confined, right? They're all in the That's not
but I will point out. I mean, you say it's not a big budget, but I would say, a lot of it probably goes into just recreating everything to make it look exactly like you would see in the Vatican, like the Sistine Chapel and all those.
Oh, okay. Places. I would agree with that, but even like the main scenes that we remember, like one was in the cafeteria. right? And then it was like in the chapel where they did the voting. Like, you know, the way members kind of congregated, they were not in that many places together, you know. So in terms of like the camera work, it was very confined, obviously, to like one specific location. But I thought the performances drove this as well. Like you had the potpourri of the good writing, the acting, and the story. I mean, this is based on a book, but you know, I'm curious what you think about, and this is a spoiler, whether did the twist to you take away from the film?
Oh, I don't. I really don't want to say too much because, like I said, we already did a review of this. But I will say that I will say that the twist I felt like was unnecessary, but either way it worked because it did speak to the overall tone of what of what the conflict is. Now I will add, and I think it's terrible that they didn't include Stanley Tucci in the mix because I thought Stanley Tucci made a good foil to Ralph Fiennes' character, because even though they both shared the same beliefs, I felt like Ralph Fiennes, you know, played a more subdued character as opposed to Stanley Tucci's, who is more, you know, out in the open. This is who I am. I'm transparent. I'm an open book kind of thing. Another thing I will add too is the fact that in terms of the way that the movie is set, I mean, you're obviously in a confined space. You kind of get the sense of claustrophobia.
Do you? Okay.
No, think about it. I mean, you're
over time.
Yeah, exactly. You're confined in one spot, and obviously, in any papal conclave, the cardinals can't leave because they don't want to be influenced or spoil the results.
I definitely get what you're saying, but I didn't feel that. I mean, I get what you're saying though, because what you're saying is to me true.
Yeah,
but I don't know that. I guess in the cafeteria, I don't know what it is.
I'm saying more like in the dormitories, because the dormitories are very small and narrow and everything like that. But what I would also add in terms of the performance in the movie is the fact that you really feel for where these men are coming from, right? Because as much as you want to say I don't like this cardinal because of X, you can sort of feel for where they're coming from because these are sincerely held beliefs and they're standing up for what they believe in. Now how that gets interpreted with the audiences will vary from person to person, but I feel like with Ralph Fiennes' character, he has the unenviable job of trying to traverse and try to like placate all these different factions.
Yeah, fair. Like I get what you mean there. Yeah, because that was interesting. It was like, because
he's got to make friends with Stanley Tucci, but he's also got to be friends with the conservatives as well.
Right. That's what I'm saying. The interesting part they put in when those protests were happening is those feelings, right, that come out that are more to the right. But you realize that you're having all these different factions with all these different beliefs. And so that was interesting that they put that in as well.
Well, also too, and I mentioned this before we started recording, you're not distracted by all these different location shots.
No.
So rather than let these different settings tell the story, you let the characters tell the story, which I think is at the core of what it means to make a good movie.
No, I think, and so like you kind of have to applaud that, right? Like even though this is based on a book, it was, because this is a pretty long film, but also it doesn't start off fast and engrossing. It kind of builds. It starts off kind of slow, and so I think you have to give it credit for kind of sticking, kind of building the tension, because that's kind of hard to do and then still have audiences engaged, right? Like, so like overall the filmmaking, every aspect, right, of the film, I really can't say there was a negative. No.
I was going to say, in terms of the visual aspects, they did, it's very black, white, and red.
Yeah.
Like I really like the fact that they kind of play up those colors,
the overhead shots were interesting, right? I thought there were a lot of them. Yeah, the eye in the sky. Yeah, that was
it was kind of like a fly on the wall kind of
That's how
sensation
you
at
saw
times.
it? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, like another thing that I would add too is the fact that when you look at movies like Conclave, it kind of reminds you that not all movies need to be focused on like all these fancy location shots or fancy VFX or anything like that. Like you can tell a good story and you can do it pretty well.
But and to that point, Luca, they could have done that, right? Like they could have done shots outside to specify exactly the area around. They referenced protests, they didn't show anything, they didn't do any reenactment.
But I think that's what adds to the
Fine.
I think what adds to the story is the
Yeah,
fact that you don't
like
see
all
it.
the outside noise we're just not focused on. Like everything outside is not relevant.
Right, right. So I think we're both in agreement. Conclave is probably going to clinch this. So the final category that I want to take a look at is best writing or best script,
Okay.
however you want to look at it.
Okay.
Now, as we already mentioned, Emilia Perez is really an adaptation of a musical.
Okay.
So we're looking at and then Conclave obviously is based on a novel, but for in this case we're going to look at both categories for adapted and original screenplay, just because we want to give ourselves some wiggle room here.
Okay.
So which movie do you think probably has the
Ooh.
best chance?
So adapted is difficult. Here's why. So I have
So you can let me preface this. You don't need to pick from both categories. You can either whatever
no,
you think
I'll
is
just
best
tell
screenplay.
you what I'm feeling
Yeah.
about it, because
Yeah.
my feeling is, although we just praised the heavens off of Conclave, I actually think Nickel Boys has the best shot of winning here.
Okay.
Because so it's interesting because this is a book that came out actually not that long ago, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't remember it coming out. Nickel Boys has definitely a more well-known author, Colson Whitehead, who's done a lot of work, and it's a tough subject matter about this reform school in Florida and these two boys' experience in it. So like the movie, from what I understand, is really, really good. It's not going to win Best Picture. It's not going to win like anything else. To me, the Oscars want to reward this film, and this is the category they will award. That's how I feel about this particular category, which I think is stronger than the original screenplay, because I personally, and I'm out. Okay, I saw September 5 in a screening, free screening. And after I saw it, I was kind of impressed with it. It was a story I knew nothing about. It's very, very interesting. And I actually thought Peter Sarsgaard would get nominated in one of the actor categories. So I'm actually leaning towards September 5th as a dark horse. I don't think it's going to win. I'm not crazy. But this is partly difficult because I really appreciate the substance story. I can't reward anybody for making a 3.5 hour movie. So I have to go with the substance.
Yeah, I mean, The Brutalist, as much as you want to like it, and believe me, like I watched parts of the movie and I tried to like it, but after a while I'm like, I'm out. Like, I'm sorry, bro. Like, you do you.
To do that to people. I think that's really unfair. And you're not even doing, it's.
Now I will say this, like if you did what Oliver Stone did when he made Alexandria, you include a few battle scenes, I think they could sort of make up for it, but it's like,
okay.
It's just one of those things where it's like, come on, man, like you don't need 3 hours for this. I'm gonna say, like, I really did enjoy September 5th just because this particular story kind of fascinates me. And I'll tell you what, like after I watched September 5th, like it made me go and watch Munich with Eric Bana, and then I watched.
I thought about doing that. It's interesting you say that.
I was gonna say, did you ever see that series Little Drummer Girl with Florence Pugh?
No, I didn't. I'm familiar with it though.
Yeah,
I have
it's
the
based
ability to watch it still.
it's based on John le Carré novel.
Okay.
And it kind of follows a similar premise where where a bunch of Mossad agents they recruit an actress to go and infiltrate a Palestinian terrorist organization. So I feel like with September 5th, it continues on with with the ethos of both of those movies and shows, Munich and Little Drummer Girl, and I feel like what it does is it kind of puts a whole I wouldn't say puts a whole new spin on it, but it kind of helps us look at it from an entirely different perspective. Because when you look at a story like that, you're mainly focusing on like the core action of Mossad or the hostage victims and the hostage takers, right?
Yeah.
But you're not looking at it from like the perspective on the outside, because we really don't. Because even when you watch a movie like Munich, you're not really seeing what the outside world is seeing. You're only seeing it from the inside out.
Right.
So I think for a movie like that, the way they go about it is pretty unique. It's not it's not anything new to me, if I'm being honest, because it's one of those movies where we've seen it happen again and again, like I said, with Munich and Little Drummer Girl. But but at the same time, I feel like it's one of those films where if you take a subject matter that people are familiar with and you put a new spin on it, I think at least you'll be able to appreciate the wider story that it's based on in a whole new light.
I agree. And the thing is that I noticed when I watched it, I always think about the Holocaust, right? Because we still get Holocaust films, and people always are like, oh my God, this is trite, right? Because let's say we know the basic story. We don't know the story about this person that might have faced specific barriers or something like that. To me, that's how I feel about the Holocaust kind of now. Whenever there's a movie about it, I'm thinking to myself, well, let's look at this aspect of it, right? And so September 5th, I thought was interesting only because my recollection, and probably most people, and you're probably, you're obviously you would be aware of it, but not everybody would. Because I honestly, and I don't want to tell too much, I wasn't sure. I thought the initial broadcast was correct, but obviously it wasn't, right? I actually didn't know. Obviously, I wasn't alive for it happening. I had no recollection of it. But I'll say, when you see it in a newsroom and see it play out, that perspective is very gripping. And it made it more of a thriller to me.
Yep.
It was very engrossing.
It's what it's like.
So.
Well, I was gonna say it kind of reminded me of where we all were on Tuesday, September 11, 2001, because what was going on in New York and DC, played out very much differently from, say, somewhere like Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was. And you live in the Washington DC area, so you're pretty familiar with probably what the atmosphere was like over there. And
I wasn't there at the time, but yeah, as you can imagine, it was so close to people near where I live that people were stopped on the freeway.
It was a far greater impact over there.
Right there, right.
Yeah, so I feel like with September 5th, it kind of, we may not have, been privy to what happened, at that time, but it kind of calls to mind what it was like where we were when another, major event like that happened. Because the way that you and I would have looked at something like, September 11th is, is going to be far more different than, say, someone who was on the ground at that time. Because I remember, because I took a trip to DC like around 2005 or 2006, and we drove over the bridge past the Pentagon. You could still see like the that side of the Pentagon where the planes hit. So for me, it kind of brought home the reality of this was an attack that pretty much traumatized everybody. I mean,
but also let's mention the audio instead of the video, right?
Yeah.
So they're hearing the audio and you're hearing the gunfire, right? You don't know what it is. The audience doesn't know what it is. That was super effective.
Right.
And that to me is something I just remembered as I watched the film to kind of enhance that suspense. because your hearing is their hearing it. They don't know what's happening. Yeah, I just thought it was an underrated film this past year.
And I gotta say, to your point, like I agree, Peter Skarsgård should have at least been nominated because his performance is just phenomenal, and it's like when you talk about injustices, from the Academy. I mean, we can list off a litany of them, and we would be here all night. But I think this will be one of them for this year's Oscars.
So we agree on that. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of, and after I think I watched the film, I was like, well, surely he'll get nominated, right? Like, you replace that Yuri or
I mean, he's a Sarsgaard, for God's sakes.
I mean, like, what are we doing? I know, like, I mean, he was great, like, and he's playing a real person, right? Like, this is all real. That's what makes it even more fascinating. And I'm shocked it didn't get more attention. I don't know why. I don't know why. I really don't. I really don't. But I was shocked.
It's one of the great mysteries of life, Dara.
It is.
like where do we go after we die? Like, why is the Earth, in its place in the universe, and why didn't Peter Sarsgaard get nominated?
Okay, let me just throw this out there. What was your best or favorite animated film of the past year?
Honestly, like, I really didn't pay that much attention to animated films, because usually when I think of animated films, I'm usually thinking of something that's a bit, it's a bit more kid friendly. And I'm probably going to date myself on this one, but like, I mean, when I'm thinking of animated films, I'm thinking of like movies like Up and stuff like that. And when I watch those movies, I'm like, it's really not going to be, taken seriously. It's just a kid's film. Now a lot of people have been saying Wild Robot is, it's a good movie to watch.
That's why I wanted to shout out. That's why I asked, because I just wanted to shout out Wild Robot. I took my niece to see it. I thought it was really cute.
I mean, well, let me ask you this: are the nominations justified? Like, does deserve its place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's favored, right, to win.
That's what I've been hearing. But a part of me is just wondering, like, it's an animated film, and nothing gets animated films. I love them to death. But
okay, at the same time, it has a message. Okay, but it has a message. The story is really well done. It's kind of interesting the way it's done, like, because you kind of throw in some environmental justice in there. So there's some elements in it that kind of make it work, even as like it's a really good story and has a moral lesson, and it's heartwarming and touching, like all these different things. Like, it really has all the ingredients.
But Dara, I'll say this: like, as someone who does animation on the side, usually when I'm looking at animation, I'm not focused on the story as much. I'm more focused on the technical aspect.
Oh.
So for me, if I were to look at an animated film, I would focus more on, like, what is the animation style like? Does it work really well? How how is it lighted? How is it, like, framed and all that stuff? I'm more concerned with the technical part. Whereas with movies like Conclave or Honora or Emilia Perez, I'm gonna focus more on, like, the story aspect or the character aspect, really.
Got it.
But I mean, that's not to poo-poo it. Like, I haven't given it a fair shake because I haven't seen it, so I can't really say much. But usually when I look at something like animated films, the first thing that comes to mind is, like, what went into making it. Like, was it computer generated, or did they hand draw it, or whatever?
That's interesting. Okay.
So I do want to move on to so the next part of this discussion is I want to talk about who do we think should have been a shoo-in. Now, we already mentioned Peter Sarsgaard on this one. So I will say this. So I did see Nosferatu on the list here, and I'm gonna lead us off and say I think Bill Sarsgaard should have at least been considered, because he did play Count Orlok, and I thought he did a phenomenal job playing this version of Dracula. And I would go so far as to say the way that he carried himself and the way that he was dressed brings a totally different take on the Dracula character. the way that he speaks, the way that his his makeup was molded to sort of look like literally like a walking corpse. I
Yeah,
thought.
I mean, and just to your point about that character, what I found fascinating was you could not, before the film came out and people
Mhm.
started taking screenshots, you could not find a shot of him as the character.
But that was a great marketing campaign.
That
I thought
was
that was brilliant.
right. Yeah. And so I found that interesting, but also I will say there is a bit of a bias when it comes to horror films. It's almost like, right, because what's the Get Out won best original screenplay, right? But
That was a Jordan Peele movie, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So that was ostensibly a horror film, right? Social commentary, blah blah blah. But I'm trying to think of the rewarding of a horror film, and I'm drawing a blank here.
Yeah, because when you talk about horror films, they speak to a niche audience, and most of the time they're not really.
Or people think they do. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think people see it as a specific, audience. Yeah.
But to your point, like it would have to have like some sort of underlying message in which it speaks to the audience in a way that it resonates with them.
It's
And
subversive or something. Yeah.
well, think about horror by nature is subversive, and the vampire out of all of the horror characters, they are subversive because they do because if you think about it, they do have to sustain themselves by drinking the blood of others. So there's like a sexual overtone, and I think you'll remember, like in the 90s, there's a lot of homosexual undertones when Interview with a Vampire came out.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, and they redid it. It's a TV series. It's interesting. I've heard great things about it, and one day I'm going to watch it because I remember the movie, but I saw it so long ago. But I just think, okay, did William Dafoe get nominated for playing Dracula? Am I wrong about that?
I know he played the Van Helsing character in Nosferatu, but I didn't see his name on the list or anything.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of the last time I remember even an actor being rewarded for, as you say, Bill Skarsgård in Nosferatu. Like,
right.
That's a parallel. I can't. I'm trying to think. That William Dafoe is all I thought of because I thought he got nominated.
But I was going to say too, because Robert Eggers is one of those directors who's up and coming, and the way that he creates these films. Yeah. And he's even said in interviews he's never going to do a modern horror film. A majority of them are going to be period pieces, and I really appreciate that because it just adds this otherworldly element to it. And when you watch movies like Nosferatu or The Lighthouse or even The Northman, like it's such a visually rich experience. Like it's desaturated of color, and yet there's just so much life in them. And when you watch these movies, it's like it's an experience. It's why we go to movie theaters to watch movies, is to be part of an experience. It's also, like going to a concert.
Yeah, but also here's the thing: when I think of period horror films, there's something. There's a tie-in with that period. I don't know if it's the Victorian era. I never can remember like what particular area it is where people are dressed a certain way. But there was a not sinister, but kind of a darker nature that goes hand in hand with something. Right? Like they just go together.
We'll keep in mind. Well, keep in mind too. I mean, we're talking about a period in history where there's still a belief in the supernatural, not like what we would see today, where the supernatural has been relegated to like the imagination. Whereas here, like they still believed it was part of reality. So I think what Robert Eggers does here is pretty justified because you can tap into that sensibility.
Right.
Now I will say this. You're the first person to hear it, Dara. I think Robert Eggers should definitely do. I think for his next movie, I think he should do his interpretation of the Inferno by Dante.
Huh.
And the reason why I say that is because one, he's never done a horror movie set during the medieval period, so I think that would work very well. But also, too, it's because of the fact that all the stuff that I said before about how the supernatural, it was was believed to be part of their reality. It was very much part of the reality during the medieval period.
Right.
So so right there, like that is just that's just ripe for the taking for Robert
Yeah.
Eggers. Not to mention too, like I think the way that he that he makes his movies, I think it'd be a visually rich experience to take us into the very bowels of hell.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. People exploring that part of horror, like I don't know. I feel like horror is kind of all over the place. There are only certain types of horror that I'm okay with digesting and watching. The Hostile style or Saw, anything way too realistic is out for me.
But what I'm saying is with the Inferno, because obviously
mythical characters, like,
right, because the Inferno is based on a poem. Yeah, so
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like when you go mythical, when you go anytime you go the Dracula route, they're Dracula route, and there are other routes you can go with historical characters that normally we say, oh, we don't want a sequel, but I never mind reinterpretations of Dracula or doing. I honestly never mind that.
Yeah, because what he did, is pretty similar to what Herzog did with his 1979 film. So Dara, what are your thoughts on who should have been nominated or what?
Yeah. So like I mentioned September 5th, just like in terms of like it should have got more flowers, so to speak. But I was thinking back as we were talking pre-show and actually now and actually before, when I was digesting all these Oscar films, I'm thinking to myself, what did I see and what did I appreciate that I felt like should have gotten more attention? The only thing I can really think of, because like I said, I saw Wild Robot and I thought it should have been nominated for Best Feature Film, Animated Feature Film. I also saw The Fall Guy, and maybe I was the only one that thought it was great. Like I thought the acting was just really, really good. And I really thought you could do maybe one, I'm not saying best picture for the film, but one of the performances, I actually thought Aaron Taylor Johnson was pretty good.
Really?
I don't, this is so random, but
you caught me off guard here.
No, I had never seen. I'm trying to think of him as a hated character. Obviously, the Tom Ford film with Amy Adams and Jake Gyllenhaal. What was that dang film? But he was the villain in that film. But the way he played the Hollywood villain in Fall Guy was like, I thought he did a good job. This is so random, but I actually thought you could have gotten a nomination out of that film, The Fall Guy.
Wow, that really came out of left field there, Dara.
Was that left field? Did you like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really good, and I think I was surprised. Even though Ryan Gosling always does a good job, Emily Blunt as well, I was like,
see, I thought you were going to say Emily Blunt. I was bracing myself for you to say Emily Blunt.
No. And I'm not biased against her or anything, but I always think she's just fine in her roles. I never see her as like, she Devil Wears Prada. She was actually a really good villain. Other than that,
Well, like, I mean,
are
it's
you
gonna
mind blown?
I mean, yeah, because now I feel like I need to go watch The Fall Guy just to see what you're talking about here.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No,
it's
not yet.
You know that,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I've just been so busy like watching like Emilia Perez for the 5th time because I'll say this. Emilia Perez is one of those movies where like when I initially heard that it was nominated, I'm like, someone's got to be trolling me. Like this can't be real. And so I'll say this, and I told my co-host this when we did a review. I basically said when I watched it the first time, I sort of got what was going on. But each time I watched and rewatched that movie, it made less and less sense to me because you know how there are some movies where you can watch over and over again and you like find something new each time. This was a movie
because you liked it and you keep exploring different things, which is different.
Right.
Yeah.
But here with Emilia Perez is like after watching it for the 5th time, I'm like, I really don't understand what's going on here. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, were there any particular movies that you felt that just made you scratch your head and you're like, what the hell am I looking at here?
So we mentioned this pre-show. Honora was everything opposite an Oscar film I can think of. Everything about it was 90s heist, not heist, but
It's
caper.
it
So
was like it was like Where's Waldo or Where's Carmen Sandiego?
I mean, like a film that would normally star Nick Nolte and someone else and some random foreign bad guys. And I'm like, this is an Oscar film? What is this?
The sex scenes were kind of gratuitous too,
Oh
because
yeah, they were totally doing this.
because as I'm watching, I'm like, what am I looking at here?
Unnecessary, yeah, unnecessary.
Well, not to mention too, like the very premise itself. It's like this Russian guy meets a stripper and he marries her, and initially I thought, okay, so he just wants his green card, but then you find out, oh, it turns out he's just a little kid. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, like he's just not a grown up, and she's, and I don't know, like that's the thing though, Luca. After I saw the film, I'm like, is this a meditation on the reality of Pretty Woman, right? Like, because he asked her to be his girlfriend for a week, right? That was
Pretty Woman was a classic, like
right. But I'm saying
Honora's softcore
like
porn.
the reality of Pretty Woman, right? Because everybody knows Pretty Woman would not happen in real life. So
yeah.
Did she buy into it stupidly, right? She said she was 23 in it or 25. But I'm just like, is that what we're showing? Because the ending scene really grabs you. Let's talk about that. Because, this Igor guy who they charge with taking her back from Las Vegas after the marriage is annulled, he gives her, the ring that she had or whatever. And somehow, and she's been hostile to him this whole time, she now is initiating sex with him. And he tries to choke her, and it's like she's so vulnerable at that moment that she's going back to her place. She just breaks down in tears. It's so fast, and then the movie ends. It's fast. It's fascinating to me because it does really lead me to think she did think, I made it. This is real. That, oh, she's marrying a rich Russian dude. Oh, my life is set. Like she really thought that.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like initially, when she went back to work and she told him she was, getting married and she didn't need to work anymore. Mm-hmm. You kind of thought for a moment, okay, she's being a bit bitchy about it, and then going through this whole heist whole palaver of trying to find her husband and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I did feel a twinge of sympathy for her, but near the end, I'm like, no, like none of this makes sense. Like this can't be real.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's the thing I felt. I'm just like, did I miss where she over time realized this isn't going to work for me, right? Once his parents actually come, and his mother is completely insistent. She's just like, you're doing this. I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
But it just made me think about, was she thinking some kind of pie in the sky thing? And I guess she was.
Well, I mean, if you think about her and Igor, they're pretty much cut from the same cloth. It's just they kind of look at things very differently, right? And that's what I find so frustrating, is the fact that you would at least think that there's like some contrast between the two, but in the end, they're pretty much the same thing. I mean, it's just one of them has money and the other one, strips for a living. So,
and I will say one thing that I do have to say, just because it's my favorite thing every year with the Oscars, and since we're doing Oscars, I just have to shout it out, because most local indie theaters have the best live action shorts and animation shorts all in a showcase. Mm-hmm. And in the past, I've probably gone in the past 5 years, I've been going. The ones last year weren't great, but generally they're stellar. And I just, those of you that do live near some indie theaters or close enough to. It's something that they play up until the Oscars. So I think this might be your last chance to do it this week.
Oh yeah, so, sort of like a marathon kind of thing, right?
Yeah. They start probably 2 weeks before the Oscars and then run up until the Oscars with the showcases. And it's really usually a really, really great watch. I people generally like to do short films sometimes. I mean, there's an end point. So generally people like to do short films. And I feel like it's a nice kind of switch up of your normal, kind of movie or whatever to do the short film showcase.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now at my local independent theater. It looks like they're showing all of the films that are nominated right now. Yep, 2025 Oscar nominated short films. Yep.
Yeah.
Right on the money.
Definitely. Yeah, and I will say, and I have to say this just because it's kind of amazing, but the Alexandria Film Festival screened last November a film that is currently nominated for an Oscar. So.
Yeah, tell us. Yeah, can you tell us about that real quickly?
Yeah, so it's called In the Shadow of the Cypress. It's a how do you say it? It's not a muted, but it's not a silent film, but it's a non-speaking film.
Right.
But I think I want to say it's from Iran. I'm pretty sure. But we showed it at our festival last November, and it's really, really good, obviously, because we screened it. But I thought it was really cool just to see it was nominated for an Oscar. I hope it wins. So good luck to the filmmakers, Shireen and Hossein.
I was gonna say, did you get a chance to talk to the filmmakers about the nomination?
No, and I think they're Iranian. So yeah, so and I think I've told you, even if they're overseas, sometimes they do come. They'll stay longer in the U.S. or whatever. But the Iranian filmmakers have a more difficult time in coming here unless they have been here for a little bit, so they have a bit more status. But just coming here and then going back, that's real difficult. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
It's difficult. So yeah.
Oh, but that's really exciting. So we got a connection here to the to the Oscars this year. So yes. I'm really really excited to see who you guys bring in for this year's festival run, because who knows, maybe they might get nominated again for next year's.
I mean, it's kind of amazing too, because sometimes you think of yourself, obviously, I've talked about it. I'm not trying to, obviously we're not Sundance or TIFF or Cannes or anything like that, but every now and then we've gotten films that do ascend, right? Like every now and then. But obviously we're not like a top tier film festival, but every year you kind of grow and it's kind of word of mouth. And so after a while, you then become the filmmaker. If they have a past film, they're like, well, I got another film, I have to apply again. So that's kind of the mindset and what you kind of aspire to.
Well, just out of curiosity, when you first screened it, when you were doing your selection for that festival run, what was it about this particular film that made you think, okay, I can definitely see this, being screened at our festival for that year?
Okay, so first of all, it's animated, which makes it different, right? Okay. It's short, which is always great, because with shorts, you can put them in showcases. It's easier to kind of create a showcase with a short film versus a feature film.
Right.
Non-speaking, which now carries a difficulty, because now you're telling a story through the action and the emotions, and it's an animated film. So now it's even more difficult now to articulate. But the directors are able to do it. And it's amazing. There's an actual story. And it's non-speaking. It's actually, I mean, it's really amazing. But the animation is not remember we were talking about specific levels of animation in terms of how high end it is or whatever. Yeah. This is not that. It's not that. It's it's doing a non-speaking, which, as you can imagine, might be difficult. It's even more difficult to me if it's animated versus live action, I think, to communicate, right? And so that's kind of a heavy lift. So that's part of it, I think, Luca, that it's able to do that.
But
actually a deep, dramatic story. That's what's amazing.
Yeah, but what I would add to that is the fact that I think it kind of works to to their benefit, because of the fact that there's not much of a language barrier you need to traverse as
you don't have it at all.
Yeah,
right? Like you can go anywhere with this film, right? Like you're not, because we've had films, because it's the little secret about the Alexandria Film Festival. Some of us some filmmakers confuse us for the Alexandria Egypt Film Festival. So we get a lot of films from the Middle East.
I was gonna say, like, so did Shirin and Hussein think, oh wait, like you guys aren't in Egypt?
I mean, I don't know. What's funny is, we get probably about 10 a year, right? From Saudi Arabia, Iran, like Qatar, like all that area, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll figure it out when you contact the filmmaker and say you've been accepted. That's when it hits them. This is the Alexandria, Virginia Film Festival, not the Alexandria, Egypt. So, like, I think in one instance, the filmmaker never responded. He was just like, "Who are you? This is not Arabic, right?" Like, and one time, a filmmaker we accepted only communicated in Arabic, but we were able to screen this film. Yeah.
Wow.
It's just kind of fascinating because we realized, and it was like, this seems like a lot of films from that area, right? Just for an American film festival, right? Like, so it was like, this is interesting, but we've gotten a lot of animated films from that area, and we've seen a ton of them. And some of them, like, you think, maybe they were applying for the Alexandria Egypt Film Festival, but they actually are students at the USC Film School. So even though they're from Saudi Arabia, so it's like they're fine with communicating, and they have like DCP, anything you need readily available to just send. So yeah. But
at the same time, I would say, like, and I don't want to sound this way, I think there's a lot more clout in having your film, screened at an American film festival as opposed to an Egyptian film festival. You know what I mean?
You do wonder that. When you get a chance, check out the Alexandria. It seems like it's kind of nice, but I actually checked out their Instagram feed.
Okay.
When they had their film festival, and they had the whole, red carpet kind of set up with pics and stuff, and I kind of was like, this might be maybe not prominent, but pretty respectable.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for our discussion for our predictions for the 2025 Oscar ceremonies that are going to air on Sunday, March 2nd. Let us know down in the comments below what your predictions are. Did you agree with our assessment, or do you think we're pretty wrong on this one? And as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.